Hi guys, in today's video we're going to be painting a Death Corps of Krieg Forge World Las Cannon team from start to finish. But first of all I want to say a huge thank you to the guys over at Stronghold Games in Hull who sent me the miniature out for this tutorial. I also will be selling this Las Cannon team to help pay for some really costly vet bills that are coming up shortly. So if you please go over to eBay and have a look at the listing, or even better still, place a bid, it would be greatly appreciated guys. I very rarely ask for help off the community, but in this instance I really could do with your help guys, so if you are going to place a bid, I do greatly appreciate it. Okay guys, as always this is going to be a long tutorial, so go get comfortable, grab yourselves a nice hot drink, or maybe my favourite, an ice cold beer, and we'll get started with the tutorial. I'll start off by priming the miniature using Alclad 2's Lacquer Primer White. It's very important to note that with these lacquer primers they're very harmful if inhaled. Please make sure you're well ventilated and wearing a respirator. Also, these lacquer primers are known as a hot liquid and can damage lesser quality airbrushes. Make sure your airbrush has PTFE solvent proof seals. If it has rubber seals then you can't use these lacquer primers. If you can't use these lacquer primers then I highly recommend Badger Stynylrez primers, which can be used in any airbrush. Here I'm priming the miniature at about 20 psi and about 3 to 4 inches away, getting a nice even smooth coverage throughout the miniature. Now we're going to use US Olive Drab by Vallejo Surface Primer range. We're going to be painting the Las Cannon and the Las Cannon battery on the miniature. I'm trying to be as careful as I can not to get overspray on the two Death Corps of Krieg's miniatures, but if I do I'm going to come and touch them up with a little white paint later on, and we'll go over why we're doing that later in the video. But for now just try to be a little careful and try and keep the olive drab on the actual Las Cannon. Now I'm going to paint with AK Interactive's Olive Drab highlights, and I'm just going to highlight the Las Cannon and also the Las Cannon battery with the highlight colour. Now I'm going to create some really subtle chips on the Las Cannon using a naught size Winsor & Newton Series 7 brush. I'm also going to be using Vallejo Game Air Charred Brown for the chips. It's very important that you roll the bristles of the brush into a nice sharp point and you very delicately place tiny little scratches and chips. The actual effect gets ruined if the chips look very big on the miniature as they're out of scale, so try to keep the chips and scratches to scale and they'll look really authentic and realistic. Here I'm using Vallejo Metal Colours Gunmetal Grey. I'm going to be using this as I feel it's the best acrylic metallic paint on the market today from my own personal use. And as you can see, it gives pretty much one coat coverage on the las cannon here gun barrel. After thoroughly allowing the metallics to dry on the las cannon, I'm coming in with Games Workshop's Agrokor shade. I'm not too worried if it actually goes on any of the olive drab colour, because that'll just leave to staining behind that will look like some really nice weathering, but we're more so concerned about concentrating on the metallics. I mentioned at the start of the video that we're going to be using Model Air white, or a white paint in general. It doesn't have to be Model Air white, it can be any white paint, and we're going to make sure that any of that olive drab that was got onto the Death Corps of Krieg miniatures is going to be pure white. It's really important that you get rid of any of the remaining olive drab on the miniatures, as we're going to be using contrast paints, and the contrast paints work perfectly with a white base coat in general. Sometimes they work better with a bone colour, sometimes with a grey undercoat, but for the colours we're using today they work best with a white undercoat. We're going to be painting the coats or max, or whatever you want to call them, of the Death Corps of Krieg miniatures, and we're going to be using contrast paint Space Walls Grey. I've placed it into a little thimble here, you can see, which is actually a tattoo artist ink well, and I add a little bit of water to control the consistency of the contrast paint. As you can see whilst painting with the contrast paint here, I try not to let it pull too much, but I actually control where it pulls and where it doesn't pull. Games Workshop says you should use a large brush and just slap it on the miniature. I completely disagree. You'll get staining left in areas that you don't want. So try to control the contrast paint, which is more like a wash than anything, and you'll get much better results. Again, you can see I'm applying the wash here, trying to let it pull in the recesses, not too much, and if I get it in any areas I don't want, I just use the natural capillary action of the brush to draw up the excess contrast paint back onto the brush. Now we're going to use contrast paint Argorous Dunes on all of the boots and socks of the Death Corps of Krieg troops, and we're also going to use it on the backpacks that they're wearing as well. They've also got face masks or gas masks if you like, and they're also going to be applied to those. Now we're going to use EU Dark Earth by VMS Pigments. We're going to apply this in a little bottle lid, and we're going to add some pigments, and then we're going to add some ENML2 binders, which is the standard variety, which is matte. It's important to note that I mix the binders and the pigment together in the bottle cap here, and we're going to apply it neat and wet to the base. Make sure you use a really old brush. You do not want to use your good Winston & Newton Series 7s to use pigments, guys. It will destroy a good brush in no time at all. So please use old ruined brushes to apply the pigments. As you can see, I'm applying the pigments wet to the base here. Now I'm going to add EU Brown Earth neat dry to the base, and as you can see, it's just going to add another texture to the base and make the mud look a little bit more believable using more than just one colour. Also, a thing to note as well, I mixed some gloss varnish with satin varnish in with some of the pigment mix that we did earlier on, and I'm going to be adding that as well into certain areas where there's dips to add puddles. So mixing with gloss varnish and satin varnish and playing with the pigments neat or in their untouched form will give different textures and different looks to the dirt that makes it look so much more realistic than just applying paint. So I highly recommend using pigments for your bases, guys, as it will give a much more realistic result than using paint, as I just mentioned. Now we're going to be using Varnish HD top coats in the matte variety from VMS products. This is a fantastic matte varnish, and I recommend you apply it in really thin coats. This is going to seal in all the pigments, and it's going to leave a really matte finish behind. After this, I add a little bit of satin varnish and gloss varnish pigments to give different textures to the base, as I mentioned a moment ago. And that's pretty much the finished result. And here you can see the finished Death Corps of Krieg las cannon team. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I enjoyed making it, guys. These miniatures are absolutely fantastic, and the Forge World Death Corps of Krieg miniature line is probably some of the best that GW make, or Forge World as it may be, and I just love them. Lastly, I want to say a huge thank you once again to Stronghold Games in Hull for sending me the las cannon team out. Also, don't forget to check the description box and also the comments fields for links to eBay where you can purchase this las cannon team and really help a hobby brother out. So thank you very much, guys, for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.